Hello, I'm Sean with Backflow Supply out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Today I want to talk about the Wilkins Pressure Vacuum Breaker 720A model, or PVB. PVB, abbreviation for Pressure Vacuum Breaker. Wilkins has a couple other models. One is a 710 that's a little different internal, a little less expensive. And then they've got a 420 and 420 XL. The XL just means it's a lead-free version. Again, a different setup than what this 720 is, but this is the most common one. This is most commonly found on a lawn sprinkler system. This is the one I have on my sprinkler system at home. It's very easy to work on. It's also very easy to winterize, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I want to be upfront about the cost of the repair kits, and it doesn't seem to matter what brand of pressure vacuum breaker you have. The repair kits are just about half the cost of the assembly, and if you have multiple issues going on with it, like a ball valve or both ball valves froze and broke, it may not be worth it. And it's going to take the same amount of work to replace a ball valve and the internals as it would be to replace the assembly. So you might as well just replace the whole thing, because you'd end up spending more to fix it. The kits, it depends on what's wrong with it as to how much you're going to spend and which brand and model. But that's something to consider. Is it worth repairing it or buying a brand new one? For me, if the shutoff valves aren't cracked and they're easy to turn, and they still turn on and off all the way, then I would just do the repair kit, even if it's more than half the cost, because then I don't have to fight taking it out and repiping it if necessary. Now, I have two of them here. This is a brand new one. This is one that a customer brought to me this year that she let freeze. She didn't get it winterized in time. So I'm going to insert some pictures of what it looked like. I wish this was my first attempt at doing this video, but it's not. So I can't take it apart right here in front of you and show you what I found. And again, I'll try and insert those pictures as we're going through. But some of the indications that it froze was she has both ball valves cracked and the top is cracked. And I could also see that the screws in the top of the canopy were not coming straight up, but they were kind of out at an angle, and you could see that that had flexed the plastic canopy. This is what the canopy is. So there's 3 screws that go into those holes. It's just plastic, and that's what holds that on. Now, before you work on these to turn them off, all you need to do is to turn this inlet ball valve, to turn that off, and then open up these test cocks, and that'll drain the pressure out. Not a big deal with this particular type to drain the pressure out, but a good practice to be in. To turn these off, the handle going across the ball valve is in the off position. The handle going with the ball valve, like it is on this one, is the open position. You don't necessarily need to close this one, but it's good practice, because when you turn it on, you'll want this in the off position. The test cocks have a screwdriver turn handle, so you just use a regular screwdriver and turn it. Every quarter turn is open close, open close, open close. Doesn't matter if you turn it left or if you turn it right. It's the same principle. If the screwdriver slot is going in line with the test cock, it's open. If it's going across it, it's closed. You don't need to turn it off your stop and waste or your valve in your basement, wherever your supply of water is coming from. This will do it, as long as you can get that to turn off tight. So once that's done, all you have to do to take this off, this canopy off, is to undo the 3 screws. Since I have done this before and it's a cracked canopy, I can't get these screws to go back into the canopy. So pretend like I just used my Phillips screwdriver and took those 3 screws out. Now that exposes the brass bonnet. The brass bonnet should have those 3 legs. Again, they should be straight up and down. You'll have a bar that goes across the center with a hole in the center to receive the stem of the poppet. And the bottom of this should be perfectly flat. You can see the threads that go on the side, and those are received into the main housing. Now, how do you get that off? Mine, I've never had a problem just using the canopy and unthreading, you know, just turning it this way. But it's not always that easy. So if yours doesn't come off that easy, the easiest way I found is taking a screwdriver across two of those legs and use those legs as leverage and unthread it. If it's really tight, you may need a longer tool. I've just got a bigger screwdriver and use that. You may need to get maybe a pipe wrench and make contact on these two of these legs to see if you can unthread it that way. But be careful because these legs can break off. But get that loose and just finish it off by hand, and that lifts up and out. See on hers how the legs come out just a little bit, and she's got a crack in that bar and it's bowed. And the bottom side is a little concaved. Then you can grab hold of the stem on the poppet and just lift it up, and that's going to bring a plastic washer out. And the poppet, sometimes when that canopy gets cracked like that, the legs get bowed and it's not flat, the stem gets bent and it tears this rubber. So you'll want to just kind of rotate it around in your hands, look at that stem, see if it's bent, make sure there's no breaks in the plastic, and that there are no tears in this rubber. And this has kind of a fold in it, and you'll want to just pull that back and inspect inside those folds to make sure there's no tear. There is one tear that's on the side that comes from the factory that way, and that's to act as a spring. It allows it to break the suction when this needs to drop down, and it doesn't require a spring. Most of the other models have a spring that's somehow attached to the bonnet that will push this down. It's kind of clever, actually. So underneath this plastic washer is an O-ring that sits down in a groove, and I'm not going to try and take it out of this one because it's kind of corroded inside, but it just sits down in a recess. Also, because this is bowed, you'll want to inspect the threads that this go into and make sure there's no cracks in those threads, make sure there's no damage beyond that. Typically there's not, but I have seen it from time to time. Next down in there is a cone-shaped spring. This is the check spring, and most of the other models it's a much smaller spring that's just down in the lower end, and there's a retainer that sits on top of it, but this one actually goes underneath the brass lip inside the bigger end, and some people struggle on how to get that out. And the easiest way to do that is to push down on one side of it and kind of angle it down, and that'll expose the top coil on the other side, and you grab that and lift it up and out. And it's really that easy. Just kind of inspect the spring. I've never seen those go bad, but again, it's possible. Now the only thing that's left down in there is this check assembly, and it's just a thick piece of rubber with a lip on the top of it. This is what centers that spring on top, and then on the bottom are these legs that are being held in place by that screw and the nut on the bottom side. Make sure those are snug, make sure these legs aren't worn. Oftentimes the water doesn't always lift it up straight, and it will wear these legs, and that can cause a problem for you. So you may need to replace that. And the easiest way to get that out is to turn the water pressure on and let that lift it up and out. But because I don't have that, I'm just going to use two regular screwdrivers and try and press against that rubber lip to lift it up and out. And now it's out, and I can inspect it, and hers is in pretty good shape. You want to look at the bottom side of it that sills on the seat and make sure there's no tears or dirt and debris in it. And then you'll also want to kind of run your finger around the seat that this presses against. You may want to turn this on just for a minute and flush out any debris that might be there as well. When that's done, you need to decide what you need to replace. This particular model has 3 different kits. One they call a complete kit, which truly is not a complete kit. It's everything below the brass bonnet. It does not include that, but it's everything below it. So it would include the plastic washer, the bonnet O-ring that sits down in that groove, the vent float, the check spring, and a new check. So that's one option. The other option is what they call the bonnet kit, which would include a new plastic canopy and the 3 screws, the bonnet that the canopy screws to, the plastic washer, and the bonnet O-ring again. And like I said, it will come with the 3 screws to screw it on. And the last option is just the poppet kit, that piece that comes up and floats. So it comes with that and just the bonnet O-ring. Now they also all come with a little package of lube. Honestly, I don't think you need it. You don't lube any of the red rubber, the vent float or the check rubber. There's no reason to lube the O-ring because it's not being pushed or twisted into place. There's no chances of it tearing as you're putting it together. But it's in the kit, and it'll come with a set of instructions, although it doesn't give you all the step-by-step things I just talked about, especially like how to take that spring out. I will also tell you that Wilkins recommends for winterizing it to leave all the components out. I don't do that with mine, but if you've got a leak in your shutoff valve, then especially to your supply side to it, that would be the best and safest way. But you would want to put your bonnet back on and your canopy to keep the dirt and debris out of the top of that. Okay, so now you've decided what to put into it. If you're going to, some new kits, or you're able to reuse the ones that are here. So you just drop this check back in place. Those legs go down into the hole that the water comes up and out of. And you just kind of have to fight that to get it to go in. Sometimes you're lucky and you can just drop it and it goes right down into it. But I am not that lucky right now. Wonder if I can... You know, I've done this several times, and almost every other time it's dropped right into place. There's just really nothing to hold on to put it into place. There we go. Okay, so next is the spring. Again, the small coil goes down at the bottom and the big coil goes at the top. And the easiest way to put that in is to make sure that's centered around the rubber on the top of that check. And then the same way you took it out, you want to angle that so that you push down on one side of it and get it going underneath the lip, and the rest of it will go rather easy. And then it'll snap into place, and just make sure it's sitting under that brass rim at the top. Then you've got your vent float that just sits in there with the pin going up, just sits there. You make sure you've got your O-ring sitting in the groove, and then you put your plastic washer on top of that, and then you'll put your bonnet on. Make sure that you get the pin of the float or the poppet going through that center hole. And then you just tighten this in. And this just needs to be snug. You can just finger tighten it. You don't have to crank it with the screwdriver or wrench. It just needs to be snug. Again, make sure that pin is coming up through the center. And then put your canopy on with your 3 screws. And that's all you need to do for that. Now, when you go to turn this on, either for the first time for the year or after you've done a repair, again, make sure you've got this in the off position. You've got your water supply coming, and this is in the off position. Make sure your test cocks are closed. And then you'll want to quickly turn this handle so that that will cause the water to push that flow up, and you'll get a little bit of water out of the top, but you should kind of hear it go thunk, and it'll seal. Once it's made that noise and it's sealed, then you'll slowly open this to your sprinkler system. And this should stay sealed. If it doesn't, that tells me you've got something else going on downstream. Either you're trying to turn too many heads on at once, or there's a break in the line. anything of that nature, but that will reduce the pressure and there won't be enough pressure to keep that float up. So if that's the case, you'll have to inspect it and find out what's going on downstream. Now, one of the things I didn't tell you, sometimes these handles are really tight. You can use a crescent wrench to grab hold of one side of it and use that as leverage. Channel locks will do the same thing. Or there's an aftermarket tool that you can put on there that's just kind of a U-shape that sits over the top of it. There's a ratchet in the center of it, and you can use that for leverage as well. And I'll try and include a picture of that. I do have those on my webpage as well. It makes it a lot easier to do that. Okay, now to winterize this. Very, very simple. As I've said, this is the one I have at home. All I ever do is I grabbed hold of this plastic canopy and I can turn this by hand. And I just unthread it that way. And let me back up. A lot of people will blow out their sprinkler systems. None of the manufacturers recommend blowing through this to winterize it. But it's done because these test cocks are here. It's easy to hook the compressor to, and they blow it out. If you do that, that's up to you. You run the risk. There's a lot of air pressure, and there's heat that's generated with that. It causes a lot of chattering, and any components that are fatigued already may be finished off by doing that. So once you've done that, make sure that this ball valve is in the off position, and you release the pressure by opening up these test cocks. Then take the top off. If you have to take the screws out and then use a screwdriver to undo the bonnet, do that. Or if you can do just the canopy and unthread it, you can do that. And then I just grab the float, lift it out, make sure the water's out of there. If I need to, I stick a rag in there, soak any extra water out. Again, as I said, Wilkins recommends leaving all the components out and then putting this back on for the winter. But I have never had a problem just putting mine back in there, all the components, and try and line up that pin, which is difficult to do without my glasses on, and then tighten that down. And then the last thing that you'll want to do is you'll want to turn these handles to a 45. That'll lessen the chance of those ball valves freezing and breaking like hers did. There's just no way to get the water out from the side of the ball once water's been introduced into it. Leaving it partway open leaves the ball away from a Teflon sill that's on both sides of that ball, gives it room for that water to expand around it. Again, it just lessens the chance. It's not a 100% guarantee. If you want that guarantee, make sure you turn this off early enough and take the whole assembly out and put it into a warm place. And then don't install it until after it's warmed up. And that should be all you need to do. I hope I've answered your questions. I hope that this has been clear enough. If not, please make comments. You can email me. The email will be at the end of this slideshow, and my phone number will be there as well. You can contact me that way as well. If this has been helpful or you liked it, please click the like button and subscribe. We try and put out new videos. It's been a long time since I've had time to do a video, so any feedback is helpful. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good day.